The Last Light of Omnaris. Part 1. The Warnings. On the edge of the known universe, at the very boundary where the fabric of space seemed to warp and stretch beyond recognition, the small, forgotten planet of Omnaris orbited a dim, dying star. The inhabitants of Omnaris had long known that their world was in danger. Scientists and seers had predicted the star's collapse for centuries, but the end always seemed to recede, like a mirage that remained tantalizingly out of reach. For those who had chosen to live on Omnaris, it was a peaceful life. They had adapted to the harsh conditions of their planet, where the sun's light had dimmed to a mere fraction of its former intensity. The skies were painted with shifting hues of orange and purple, and the landscape was dotted with strange crystalline structures that hummed with the resonance of forgotten power. The people had long since abandoned technology, relying instead on the organic, symbiotic relationship they had cultivated with their world. Yet the collapse of their star was inevitable. The once vibrant, glowing sun had begun to sputter out, its light weakening year after year, and now, after countless centuries of quiet warning, the last light of Omnaris was finally beginning to fail. A small, curious ship broke through the atmosphere, gliding silently towards the planet's surface. Aboard was a lone traveler, a human named Kael Darrin. He was an outsider, a member of the Intergalactic coalition, sent on a mission to make contact with the dwindling population of Omnaris before it was too late. Kael's assignment had been straightforward: find out what remained of the Omnarian people, assess their situation, and report back to the coalition. The mission, however, was never meant to be a rescue operation. No one expected Omnaris to survive the impending collapse of its star, but Kael's superiors hoped that some knowledge or technology might be salvaged, something that might prove valuable in the future. As Kael descended through the atmosphere, his eyes were drawn to the shimmering city of crystalline spires below. It was a city that had once been filled with life, bustling with energy and the pulse of civilization. Now, it was silent. Only a handful of lights flickered in the distance, and even those seemed to struggle to remain lit. He landed in the center of the city and stepped out into the cool, thick air. The ground beneath his feet was slick with dew, and the metallic smell of the city's decaying infrastructure lingered in the air. Kael approached the nearest structure, a great dome made of crystalline material, and hesitated before stepping inside. The interior of the dome was dim, illuminated only by the soft glow of bioluminescent plants that grew along the walls. At the center of the room sat a figure, cloaked in flowing robes, staring into a pool of swirling light. The figure was not human, but a being native to Omnaris, a being who had evolved alongside the people of the planet. The figure turned its head toward Kael, its eyes glowing with an eerie, otherworldly light. "You have come too late," the figure said, its voice echoing in the still air. "The last light is fading, and there is nothing you can do to stop it." Kael swallowed, the weight of the figure's words settling over him. "I'm here to help," he said, though he knew the odds of survival were slim. "The Intergalactic Coalition." "The Coalition will not save you," the figure interrupted. "You have no idea what is at stake here. You think you've come for knowledge, for technology, but you are mistaken. The fate of Omnaris is not just the end of a planet. It is the end of something far greater." The figure's eyes narrowed, and Kael felt a deep, uneasy shiver crawl up his spine. "You do not understand the true nature of this world," the figure continued. "Omnaris is not simply a dying planet. It is the final bastion of a much older civilization. It is the last remnant of a species that existed long before humanity, before the coalition, and even before the great galactic empires that you know today." Kael was silent, unsure of how to respond. He had heard stories of ancient civilizations, of forgotten worlds and lost technologies, but he had never truly believed in their existence. Yet here, standing before this being, he couldn't shake the feeling that something far more significant than a dying planet was at play. Part 2. The Last Keeper. The figure rose slowly, its robes billowing out in a gentle wave of movement. "Come," it said, its voice no longer tinged with sadness, but with a quiet determination. "I will show you." Kael followed the being as it led him through the dome and out into the sprawling city beyond. They passed through streets lined with crumbling structures, their once pristine surfaces now cracked and weathered. Strange, shimmering lights flickered sporadically from the buildings, as if they were fighting against the darkness. The being led Kael to a massive structure at the center of the city, an enormous spire of crystal that reached high into the sky. The spire pulsed with an ethereal energy, the color shifting from soft blue to deep violet, as though it were alive. "This is the heart of Omnaris," the figure explained. "This spire is not merely a monument. It is the repository of all knowledge, all history, and all power that our people once possessed. But it is dying, just as our sun is. The knowledge contained within these walls is fading, and when it is gone, so too will the memory of our civilization." Kael stepped closer to the spire, his hand instinctively reaching out to touch the smooth, cool surface. The moment his fingers made contact, a surge of energy coursed through his body, and images flashed before his eyes, visions of long-forgotten wars, of starships traveling across vast, uncharted territories, and of a civilization that spanned galaxies, with technology far beyond anything Kael had ever seen. The vision stopped abruptly, leaving Kael breathless and disoriented. "What was that?" he gasped, his heart racing. "It is the legacy of our people," the figure replied solemnly, "and it is all that remains. Our civilization once controlled the very fabric of reality. We were the architects of the universe itself, the creators of life and death, and the masters of space-time. But in our arrogance, we sought to conquer what was never meant to be controlled." Kael's mind reeled. You created life?" The figure nodded. "We were the first. But our hubris led to our downfall. The collapse of our sun is not a mere accident. It is a consequence of the power we wielded. The star's death is a reflection of the death of our people. And soon, this planet will be nothing more than a memory." Kael stood still, absorbing the enormity of the being's words. He had come to Omnaris with the simple goal of documenting the last remnants of an extinct culture. But now he understood that there was far more at stake than he could have ever imagined. The collapse of the sun was not just the death of a planet. It was the end of a story that had shaped the entire universe. Part 3. The Choice. The figure led Kael to a hidden chamber within the spire where a series of ancient artifacts lay scattered across the floor. At the center of the room stood a pedestal upon which rested a small crystalline object. It pulsed with energy, much like the spire itself. "This," the figure said, "is the last of our legacy. It is a fragment of the power we once wielded, a remnant of the force that shaped the universe. It is a gift, Kael Darrin, but it comes with a choice." Kael stared at the crystal, sensing its immense power. "A gift? What do you mean?" "You can take this crystal back to your people," the figure explained. "You can give it to the Intergalactic Coalition, to the galaxy. You can use its power to save your own world, or perhaps to prevent the collapse of your own sun. You may rewrite history with it. But it's not just power," the figure continued, its voice growing softer. "It is a warning. The very force that gave birth to your universe is tied to the power of this crystal, and if it is misused, if it is turned toward conquest, it will bring about a new cycle of destruction. The power we wielded once before led to our fall. Will your people be wise enough to resist it?" Kael looked at the crystal, feeling the weight of the decision pressing upon him. He knew that if he took the crystal, humanity might unlock a new era of technological advancement. But at what cost? Would they learn from the mistakes of the past, or would they repeat the same fatal errors? "I don't know if we're ready," Kael said quietly, stepping away from the pedestal. "But maybe maybe humanity is ready to learn." The figure nodded, as though it had expected this answer. "Then let it be your choice, Kael Darrin. Take the crystal or leave it. But understand this, Omnaris will die, and so too will its legacy. It is your decision whether that legacy will live on." Part 4. The Final Light. Kael stood at the edge of the spire, watching as the last rays of the dying star flickered in the sky. The choice lay before him, a choice that would alter the course of human history. With one final glance at the crystal, he made his decision. "I will leave it," he said softly. "The power is not ours to wield." The figure bowed its head, a subtle expression of approval passing across its ethereal features. Then Kael Darrin, "You have chosen wisely." As Kael turned to leave, the last light of Omnaris flickered and dimmed, fading into the cold, eternal darkness of space. But in the depths of Kael's heart, he knew that the legacy of Omnaris would not be forgotten. It had not died. It had simply passed on its knowledge, its warning, to the next generation, and humanity, for better or worse, would carry that burden into the stars.